The Banker's Manifesto of 1892.
You are listening to Defending Utah Radio. Defending Utah. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Join Defending Utah today, because if you're not on a government watch list yet, you should be. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, the founder of Defending Utah, Enoch Moore.
Investigating a conspiracy and verifying the Banker's Manifesto of 1892. What is the Banker's Manifesto of 1892? Is it real? Is it evidence of a grand conspiracy? The following is quoted from the Banker's Manifesto of 1892. The question of tariff reform must be urged through the organization known as the Democratic Party, and the question of protection with the reciprocity must be forced to view through the Republican Party. By thus dividing voters, we can get them to expand their energies in fighting over questions of no importance to us, except as teachers to the common herd. Thus, by discreet action, we can secure all that has been so generously planned and successfully accomplished. The so-called Banker's Manifesto of 1892 is an alleged claim that the bankers in America got together and admitted to conspiring against the people of America and wrote it down in plain language so that all the bankers could be on the same page. The thought here is that if they admitted to it, then it should be all the evidence needed to prove a grand conspiracy against our country by a small group of people. If this quote is real, then the implications are far-reaching. It means that the public in general has been completely duped into fighting against themselves, year after year, for over a century, for the benefit of an elite few and their private agenda. The left-right battle would be to keep us in their game. Generally, when people post about this conspiracy, those who have already a belief in such a grand conspiracy share it willingly, hoping to wake up other people and prove there's a conspiracy we need to be aware of. When those who believe in such a conspiracy try to teach others who don't believe, the most common reaction is that the potential student is simply not interested. Sometimes people lose friends over trying too hard. In the cases where the potential student is curious enough to look at the evidence, even for a moment, the most important thing for the teacher is to have shared something credible, that is verifiable and true. Even if something is true, if the source itself falls short of a high standard of evidence, the opportunity to have helped someone wake up is gone, and the stereotype of the crazy conspiracy theorist will have been reinforced. With all that said, I decided to investigate the Banker's Manifesto. I will walk you through where this comes from, a variety of sources online, how some of them are dead ends that will not convince a non-believer, and I will find out if there is any truth to this document or not. The goal here is to show an example of the type of research truth seekers should engage in before spreading information online about really important things. Our standard of evidence should be very high. That is, if we want to break through the media's stereotype of conspiracy theorists to the average sleeping person. We will first talk about some of the claims out there, and then we'll investigate those claims. Some examples of online sources. It's important to be aware of what we share publicly. How easily can your article be debunked? What does that do to the overall credibility of anyone who argues for the same position? One image, which can be seen on our website in the article corresponding to this podcast, has been circulated on social media for many years, taking different forms. Such an image implies something very official with signatures and all. but it is very clear that this is a modern recreation and not a real document for multiple reasons. Please check the article on our website to review the document and see. An example is available in 2020 when this was shared on social media. We see another example in 2014 of a social media page which shared a Google Doc called the Banker's Manifesto of 1892. They share it with this comment: "This is some very compelling information written in 1893 showing that the secret combination of the international banking cartel has been working hard to control the political situation in America for a very long time." And then we give an example of, in 2017, a podcast which references the document and how it was allegedly recorded in the U.S. congressional record. Certain unverifiable sources are then listed. Really big claims should always be accompanied with sources that can be verified. Let's walk through various sources that are not verifiable. This helps us identify things to look for when deciding what types of sources to share to prove something is true. One link on our website is a miscellaneous site you can find on the web that some people share called Freedom School. This source is a random web page from this website. This is the least reliable type of source. It is just a page someone typed out that not only misses any kind of images of original sources or links to where you can find an original source, but it does not even attempt to explain where it came from. No thinking person should take this page to mean anything more than the imaginations of the writer. Again, that does not mean that the Banker's Manifesto is not real per se, but certainly this page lends no credibility to the manifesto. In fact, a trick that is sometimes used to debunk something that is true is to create an unreliable-looking page like this so that people no longer take it seriously. Another website that calls itself the Anti-Corruption Society blog provides another document as their source that they created. Here, at least, a PDF download feels like you're downloading a document of some kind. But still, you'll find that this is something any bored conspiracy theorist or fake newsmaker could create in their spare time very quickly. The document does mention a U.S. congressman and some vague leads, but I have seen a lot of fake news over the years claiming Congress did things that they didn't really do. My favorite fake story was when, allegedly, Congress passed a bill to purchase 30,000 guillotines to cut off our heads, as if ISIS had infiltrated Congress. If you read through the first paragraph on this USA Today article, linked on our website, you can see how easy it is to use these fake news stories to make conspiracy theorists sound ridiculous. This PDF document attempts to give a source as New American 1934, but this is not a proper source. What even is the New American? The New American magazine did not come out till many decades after this time. Searching the internet for such a vague source will not be straightforward. Someone making a big claim should have an exact page number, issue number, etc., with a hard scan of the original source where the bankers published these words. And if possible, even a link where the reader can get a hard copy of the original source themselves. That would add credibility. Now, investigating the allegation that this can be found in the Congressional Record of the United States. The source I found from a post as, quote, proof of a congressional record is linked in the article on our website. Initially, it looks hopeful that it might be a good source being on a site like archive.org, but the document itself says the author is unknown, and the content of the document is again nothing but one unknown person's ramblings, with no verification as to the actual claim of the congressional record. Another older book source is a book called Imperialism in America, Its Rise and Progress. This digital book can be found on Google Play again linked on our website. This source has more credibility that might start convincing a few people of the possibility to its truth. But still, it ultimately falls short of the standard of original sources for evidence. Pages 71 and 72 of the book explains that the newspaper, the Chicago Daily Press, published something that they said came from, quote, Wall Street. And then they quote the full text of the alleged manifesto. At least with this book, someone determined to find the original source has a strong lead. We must find original archives of the Chicago Daily Press from March 21st, 1892, and verify if they did publish such language from, quote, Wall Street. Now I'm going to go in search of the actual congressional record. First of all, a document being in the congressional record does not guarantee its authenticity. You can theoretically enter a fake document into the U.S. congressional record. However, that would certainly be a political or maybe a legal risk for the person entering it on the record. So it may be okay to cautiously assume credibility here. Anyone can search the public U.S. congressional record at www.congress.gov. When I searched for the text, question of tariff reform, which is the beginning of the quote from the Banker's Manifesto, 4 results came up in the U.S. congressional record, screenshotted on our website. I checked each result individually, and none of them matched the alleged Banker's Manifesto. It does not seem to be true that this is in the congressional record at all. Unless it was not entered with this exact text, feel free to contact me if you know different, and I'll update this article. So now, let's look and find some real sources. In 1920, the Banker's magazine published the text, but for the purpose to claim it was a fraud. Their official statement was, such a statement as is quoted never appeared in the Banker's magazine. However, this may be misleading. As we've already seen, the original claim is that a newspaper in Chicago published it based on what it nicknamed a Wall Street letter, so it is more of a miscellaneous pamphlet that was privately circulated to certain individuals, not an article in the Banker's magazine. The Banker's magazine seems to be using a straw man approach here to debunk the letter. In my own research on this subject, I found a Reddit thread, linked on our article, that originally posted the relevant 1892 issue of Banker's magazine, which confirmed that they did not publish the original text of the manifesto. But again, that's not the claim for what the original source is anyway. In 1895, an Oklahoma newspaper called the Cleveland Voice posted, and this was on June 8th of 1895, they posted a copy of the text stating that it came from the Chicago Daily Press. They said, this letter was published in the Chicago Daily Press and created quite a furor among the bankers, and they at once took steps to destroy that issue of the paper and suppress the further publicity of the letter. Here is the circular. Read it. Think it over. In 1896, a Kansas newspaper called Appeal to Reason published the text of the manifesto. That was on Saturday, February 8th, 1896, which an original scan of the newspaper, but still not the original letter itself, can be found at newspapers.com. Then, in a couple years before that, in 1894, a Dallas, Texas newspaper, that was November 15th of 1894, they published the text called, and this newspaper was called the Southern Mercury Newspaper. And here they give a more clear claim as to exactly how this letter came about and where, finally, the original source should allegedly be. Here's what they posted. The circular, known as the Wall Street letter, was dropped by a prominent banker on the stock exchange in Chicago and was picked up by Mr. T.W. Gilruth, then a reporter on the Chicago Daily Press, and first published in that paper. The bankers at once took steps to destroy the paper. Mr. Gilruth now resides in Kansas City, Missouri. A few days since the Ohio populist addressed a letter to Mr. Gilruth requesting a copy of the original and its history, we append his reply. And just to note, the Ohio populist was, again, a different newspaper. And so here's the quote. That was the reply from Mr. T.W. Gilruth to the newspaper, the Ohio Populist. Gentlemen, your letter dated October 17th arrived this morning, and I hasten to answer it in view of the importance of the request you make, and enclose you a copy of the document known as the Wall Street Letter. It is a genuine emanation from the people who are engaged in an attempt to destroy a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and establish in lieu thereof a government of plutocracy, long-winded titles, oppression, and slavery for the masses. I had the Wall Street Letter published in the Chicago Daily Press, which resulted in the bankers taking such steps as destroyed the paper. The press is no longer published. I was born at Worthington, Franklin County, April 6, 1843, in Ohio. My father, Reverend James Gilruth, was well known all over the state years ago. He has an abolitionist concerning chattel slavery, and I am an abolitionist concerning wage slavery. Yours fraternally, T.W. Gilruth. This is as close as we get to an original source, as these are the very words of the person who found the Wall Street Letter and gave it to the Chicago Daily Press to have it published. As already referenced, the Reddit thread did a similar deep dive. I commend this guy for his commitment to truth-seeking. By the end of this article, you'll see that I have a similar but significantly different conclusion than the gentleman in the Reddit thread. So, verifying details surrounding the original story. Thanks to our friend in the Reddit thread, he identified that the person mentioned in the letter, Mr. T.W. Gilruth, has a real birth record, as is therefore not a fictitious person. He says, quote, an Ancestry.com record lists a Thomas Westlake Gilruth, matching the exact birth particulars given in the Mercury. This is our man, born in Worthington, Ohio, USA, 6th of April, 1843, to James Gilruth and Mary Westlake. So let's make some honest conclusions about all this information that we've seen. We've been able to verify that a copy of the letter itself was definitely published in many contemporary newspapers of the era. The only thing ultimately missing is an image of the original Wall Street Letter itself. This might be because it was not originally intended to be published, no photograph was taken of it, but newspapers retyped the content. Unless we find the original Wall Street Letter itself, we are left with these three possible conclusions, one of which must be true. And even if we find the letter, we're still probably left with similar options to these. Option 1. The original Wall Street Letter never existed. Therefore, we know that there was a conspiracy to convince people that the letter existed with coordinated newspapers across the country. Even in this case, somebody wrote the content of the letter before it could be spread around. Option number 2. The letter did exist and all the newspapers reported accurately. Option number 3. A mixture of options 1 and 2, possibly. Maybe the letter was actually dropped by accident, but then the bankers took advantage of it as a political tool in their favor. Personally, I lean heavily towards option number 1. Based on over a decade of thoughtful experience studying and actually opposing real conspiracies in politics, it was created and purposefully leaked. And then the coordinated conspiracy to tell people about it was a strategy of controlled opposition. This is where the bankers would have willingly outed themselves because they know people suspected what they were doing anyway. By outing yourself, you get to pick the people who are going to try and oppose you, and thereby control the end result. Our Reddit friend documented very well how this Mr. Gilrath was part of a political movement called the populist movement, whose goals in the end would have actually benefited the world banking establishment. Things like demanding a public central bank and nationalizing transportation. These are very much Marxist goals. The existence of the letter was used for many years to push the populist agenda. Watch Defending Utah's presentation on controlled opposition for a full explanation of how that works, linked in the article. Additional support for my conclusion. This idea that the bankers would fight themselves is discussed in G. Edward Griffin's masterpiece, The Creature from Jekyll Island. In this book, he explains, in order to help get the original Federal Reserve Act passed, the bankers pretended to be against it publicly. There are other quotes throughout time that are widely accepted and verifiable, which add additional support to the idea that the two-party political system was designed to waste our time. Additional sources like this add powerful strength to the idea of what the Banker's Manifesto is saying, and it shows that this idea has not died over time. It is a timeless strategy. Here is that quote by Professor Carol Quigley, who wrote the book Tragedy and Hope. He says, the argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies is a foolish idea. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy. Then it should be possible to replace, every 4 years even if necessary, by the other party, which will be none of these things but will still pursue with new vigor approximately the same basic policies. So even if this whole thing were a pseudo-hoax of one kind, the Banker's Manifesto, that is, it was definitely a conspiracy of a different kind. In all cases, someone representing the bankers made the letter, whether to communicate among the bankers or to fool the people. It doesn't make any difference. So now my final conclusion. The status of whether the Banker's Manifesto of 1892 is real or not is essentially verified, but it's not black and white. It's verifiable with questionable intentions. What's verified is that there was a conspiracy to create the letter. So it's safe to discuss the Banker's Manifesto as part of showing how the grand conspiracy against our freedoms works. But now you have a good set of the facts and context with some rational analysis. This will help you have the most intelligent conversation possible about what it is and what it means. If you appreciate content like this, please subscribe to our mailing list or consider becoming a supporting member today and participate in making a difference. Please go to defendingutah.org and click on the membership. Please consider visiting and supporting our sponsors. 7 Prep Steps, 7prepsteps.com. Be prepared. FoodStorageDepot.com. HealthSaves.org, Alternative Health Clinic. LDSFreedomBooks.com. Allegiance Real Estate at ChandlerR.com. That's Chandler.com. GlobalRemarketing.net. AndersonAccounting.com. That's ANDERSEN accounting.com. Integra Law at integralaw.net. freedomsrisingsun.com. waterofchampions.org. highercallingfirearms.com. and Mount Zarin Ministries. Get your religious exemption verified at mountzarin.org. Thanks for listening to Defending Utah Radio. We'll see you next time.